Kate Mason and I'm from Australia. On the 12th of August 2024, Bill Shorten, the Federal Minister for Government Services, announced in a press conference the unrolling of the Digital Identity Trust Exchange, or TEX for short, which is the infrastructure for the people's everyday use of Australia's digital ID. This video is in 3 parts. The first are shorts from Shorten's press conference with intercepts of my commentary. The second covers ID 2020, the global digital organisation which tasked themselves with creating the global digital ID framework. ID 2020 is funded by the likes of Rockefeller, Garvey, Microsoft, and many more powerful corporate interests. I specifically hone in on the 2016 ID 2020 press conference at the United Nations, sponsored by the United Nations Office for Partnerships. This press conference takes an interesting turn when a journalist from the inner city press asks about corruption charges involving the Office for Partnerships. I have a little bit more of a look into this. After all, if a global digital ID system is being unleashed on the peoples of the world, brought about through private interests and in collaboration with the United Nations, the people who are going to be under the identification need to feel comfortable with any implications to our life and capacity for autonomy. I finish with a video I put together about a year ago, which shows some of the scope of the digital ID, the scope the government should be transparent about but is not. So for the sake of democracy, I will share elements of the larger picture of the situation the Australian government is forcing the people into. So let's start with Bill and his address. He's very vague on details, but I've cut out as much as I can of the repetitive spin to unpack as many concrete details as possible.
Today at the National Press Club, Minister for Government Services and the NDIS, Bill Shorten.
Today I would like to discuss how our nation becomes the world leader in government service delivery and how we employ technology to achieve that goal. And I will share with you an exciting step forward for Australia's digital infrastructure. Services Australia, through Centrelink, Child Support and Medicare, intersects with every Australian at some stage of their lives. From birth to retirement to the myriad life events in between, Service Australia is there.
As Bill Shorten states, nearly all Australians need to access Service Australia at some point in their lives. It involves income support such as baby, carer, pension, unemployment payments and Medicare, which is Australia's health cover. When the Digital ID Bill was passed in May 2024, just a few months ago, politicians went to great lengths to say it would be voluntary. Though the legislation states that a digital ID will be voluntary, there are clauses put in to allow it to be mandatory. Division 5 of the Act, point 74 states, digital ID must be voluntary. However, there is an exception under subsection 4, and the exceptions are small business, a business that solely offers a service or access to a service online, which is predominantly most big businesses, or there is an exceptional circumstance. It's being shoved down our throats that we are in an era of rolling crises. We are constantly going to be bombarded with exceptional circumstances. That is, government-decreed crisis where normal conditions and human rights are waived. The template for this is the government COVID policies. They've put a waiver in there which allows every business to demand a digital ID for our access to their services. Digital ID was never going to be voluntary. In my view, the government is outright lying. It is the stated mission of the United Nations that all people in the world will have a digital identity by 2030.
Services Australia has been a source of innovation, especially under David's leadership. Passkeys are a good example of agency innovation that has made Australia a global pioneer in improving security of online services. Now, there's global leaders like Google and Microsoft and Sony already give users the option of replacing passwords with passkeys. Instead, using your face or your fingerprint as your password to sign into websites and apps. Unlike passwords, passkeys are resistant to phishing and scammers, and you don't need a good memory.
Bill is setting the scene for biometric scanning to be implemented into the digital ID infrastructure. He makes this statement and then quickly moves on.
But, as they say, the future is digital. Some of the most significant budget announcements were the investments in digital ID and MyGov. This reflects the need to reduce the data stored and shared by increasing use of digital ID.
One of the main justifications Bill uses for digital ID is that it limits the amount of data stored and shared. In reality, a lot more data on the Australian people will be collected and stored over time.
And answers the MyGov audit calls for the platform to be funded on an ongoing basis as nationally critical infrastructure. MyGov is the largest online platform in the country, with 5.6 million people now using the MyGov app. But at the moment, its potential is underutilised. Australians, we have a Ferrari in the garage, but we only take it out to do the grocery shopping. I want to change that.
Bill is out of touch with the people. Very few people in Australia have Ferraris in their garage. Most Australians are financially struggling. It's a ridiculous analogy. But Bill is clearly stating that he wants many more than 5 million Australians on the MyGov app. He wants all of us on the digital ID, and he's going to make sure that we have to get one to be able to access essential services.
Because MyGov is the gateway to Australia's digital future. A secure, inclusive, exciting digital future. Today, I unveil a project that we have in development that we call the Trust Exchange, or TEX. I'm collaborating on this project with my colleagues, Senator Katie Galley, the Minister of Finance, who has carriage of digital ID, and the Assistant Treasurer and Minister for the ATO, Stephen Jones. TEX will not duplicate digital ID, but builds upon investments already made in that system. TEX will use MyGov and MyGov ID to make the sharing of personal information more secure and trustworthy. The difference between MyGov and MyGov ID is simply MyGov ID, owned by the ATO, does just one thing. It proves your identity to both government and business. On the other hand, MyGov, owned by Service Australia, is a place where you can use your MyGov ID to conduct up to 16 federal government services online, and we will keep adding more.
So 16 services are on the MyGov currently, and many more will be put on there. Voluntary digital ID is used currently to access these services. The services on there are child support, Department of Health applications, Department of Veterans Affairs, Housing Victoria, Healthcare Identifiers Services, Australian Tax Office, Centrelink Medicare, My Aged Care, Cancer Screening Register, National Disability Insurance Scheme, the NDIS, State Revenue Office Victoria, Unique Student Identifier for Students and Workforce Australia, which is Jobs and Pathways to Employment. Of course, over time, under the justification of cybersecurity, it will be mandatory to have a digital ID to prove who we are to access MyGov.
The strength of this tech trifecta has the potential to give Australians control of their data that will rival what I think is the gold standard for citizens' rights digitally, the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe, but without the European regulation and complexity. We're opting for the carrot over the stick because individuals, business and government all win from this.
Note how Bill lets us know that the government will start with a carrot approach to get people onto digital ID, but it will turn to the stick.
And where most other jurisdictions have a centralised ID with a number from birth, we're embarking on the first decentralised model, which provides more privacy and security features. Now, I get that in entering the digital world, we have to grasp new language and concepts. Think back to when we first heard about the cloud. TEX is something brand new and world-leading.
The statement that citizens have control over their own data is spin. The PR front of decentralised digital ID is that you only need to share specific information. For example, if you had to show proof of ID to get into a bar, you have to show your driver's licence, for example. This not only states your age, but also has your address on it. So digital ID allows you to only share your age, thereby it is more secure and the citizen is in more control of what data they share. What's not said is that under digital ID, you have no control over what the government decreed requirements will be to access goods and services. You will have choice, but the choice will be show us or access is denied. And that's not real choice. Here's Microsoft talking about decentralized identity.
Meet Alice. Her new digital wallet empowers her to own and control credentials. Since it's not tied to any one organisation, authoritative sources can confidently issue standards-based credentials to Alice. When Alice presents these credentials, websites and apps can check that they're valid, for example by confirming with a university that she's a student there, and then grant access accordingly. While this process may be easier, how do we know it's trustworthy? Decentralized identifiers leverage proven cryptographic systems. When Alice presents her credentials, her digital wallet generates a unique identifier and signs it using a private key, secured by a biometric proof or PIN that only she knows. The uniquely paired public key is published to a distributed ledger. Alice can present her digital student ID card to a bookstore, and before granting a discount, the bookstore can confirm that the university issued the card to Alice. This experience mimics what Alice does today. She can digitally present and authenticate a set of verifiable credentials just as she would present a physical card, and she can revoke them with a single click, just as she would return a card to her wallet. Best of all, these digital cards are private. This puts Alice in sole control of her digital identity. She makes the decisions for it. Verifiable credentials will make it easier to stay in control and help unlock a more trustworthy internet that respects privacy for all of us.
So we have a digital ID which verifies who we are and will be increasingly mandatory to access goods and services. I won't go into too much detail now regarding what will be housed in the digital ID over time and what we will need to do to allow for access to goods and services. This is discussed in the third part of this video. Suffice to say, we are exiting a world where as long as we had money and didn't break the law, we had access to goods and services. We are entering a world where, under the justification of rolling crises, access to goods and services will be determined by things such as carbon scores, vaccination status, social credit scores, and more.
It is not a wallet, nor an app, nor ID, but rather it is a secure means by which to exchange with a third party who you are, your identity, and what you can do, your credentials. Service Australia is partnering with other government systems to develop techs, to give Australians the ability to verify their identity and credentials based on official information already held by the Australian Government. I want to stress that TEX is currently in the proof of concept stage. We have an $11.4 million Commonwealth investment in the build-out as part of the Digital ID project. So between now and December, TEX will establish the ability to issue a verified credential, the ability to selectively share information, and the ability to prove your identity without sharing information. Over the next few months, we will add Medicare, DVA, organ donor and concession cards. By January 2025, the proof of concept will be complete and we'll assess what our options are for pilots. This new digital infrastructure can drive progress that lets individuals control their own data while creating opportunities for productivity gains and economic progress. Here's how it could work, and I'll use the MyGov wallet to illustrate. 1, you need a service. Say you're booking a hotel room, as an example. 2, when you check in, the hotel requests your personal information, your attributes. That could often be a driver's licence or passport. 3, with TEX, instead of handing over those documents to be copied in some form, stored goodness knows where, you would scan a QR code on the front desk or use technology similar to tap-to-pay machine that digitally shakes hands with your MyGov wallet. So 4, you choose only the information you wish to share with a hotel from your digital wallet and you consent to its use. 5, you will have a record in your MyGov wallet of what you shared and with whom you shared it.
This means the government has handy records of everything you access in real time. Do you want the government to know that much about you? Isn't that government overreach?
You know, talking about this in the media this morning, someone reached out to my office and said, could we please expedite that for his Airbnb? So, and I'm using his words, they're not handing over sensitive information to some rando.
Well, that's a classic switch. Say at a press release that the government will have stored information on people's whereabouts, what services they're accessing, and in time what goods they are buying, and then say a lame joke to diffuse the seriousness of the statements.
Because the trust exchange will deliver 3 benefits: choice, consent, and trust. Choice, you choose what information is shared and with whom it is shared. 2, consent. You deliberately consent to every bit of the information that you share. 3, trust. The information shared is trusted because the system imposes rigorous privacy and security standards to validate its authenticity.
Expect to hear the words choice, consent, and trust repeated incessantly whilst we're in the carrot stage of the government digital ID implementation. Once the government switches to the stick stage, there will be no choice regarding using a digital ID. This will be the blatant coercion stage, the template being the government's brutal COVID policies. You can choose not to get a digital ID, but this will come along with loss of work, income, social shunning, and loss of access to goods and services. Your choice, you choose.
And as I said, there may be instances where text can verify your identity without any information being exchanged at all. Take the case of someone going to one of the local club's ACT venues and wanting to prove that they're 18 and over. The plan with text is that they would just hold their phone to a tap-to-pay style machine, and a digital token will be sent to the club vouching for their identity that they're 18 or over. Not even their actual age is disclosed, merely that they're over 18. So this token will be a valuable, reliable promise to the club, but of zero value to a cyber criminal, because the confirmation token will not contain any personal information.
Again, cybersecurity threats will be one of the main justifications to make the digital ID mandatory.
All that's been exchanged is a digital thumbs up from the government that you are who you say you are.
That's worth repeating. A digital thumbs up from the government that you are who you say you are. This is a fundamental shift in government control. The government now has the power to allow or deny you access to services that previously were not under the government domain.
I think business is keen, and to be clear, text will be an opt-in system. I suspect people will vote with their feet once they have an option, and they'll choose businesses that offer them the convenience of control and security of text. I'm pleased to advise that Telstra and Google have welcomed the opportunity to be involved in the development of this important step towards our digital future. And the Tech Council of Australia, the Commonwealth Bank and employment platform SEEK have all given in-principle support for text. CBA described text as the public digital infrastructure private industry needs. SEEK Managing Director Ian Narev said the expansion plans for digital credentials will, and I quote, make a big difference to the effectiveness of our labour markets, helping job seekers and businesses of all sides.
Bill is letting business know that if they don't get on board with text, they will not be able to stay profitable. He brings in the big guns, Google, SEEK, Telstra and a bank to drive home his message. It's also confirmed here that access to your bank accounts and work credentials will be accessed in future through a digital ID, as well as paying for telecommunication services like Telstra.
Consent, choice, trust.
Consent, choice, trust. This is WEASEL speak and code for coercion, obligation, control.
I know it's still a bit of an abstract concept at this point, but once it's in place, text will have countless exciting applications. It's the potential to supercharge innovation across our economy, creating opportunities in all sectors, as well as for small businesses who don't want to be burdened with having to keep and collect data they don't need. With the work currently being done, MyGov users will be able to add more cards and certificates to the MyGov wallet, including from state government and in time private industry. I'm working with colleagues in states to facilitate storage of licences and cards in MyGov and in state digital wallets. We're getting moving on this, and it's on track to happen by the end of 2024. Equally, I want the Medicare card and Commonwealth concession cards to be included in state-based wallets. Trade certificates will also soon be available in your MyGov wallet.
This is all part of the fourth industrial revolution, the merging of humans with machines. Clearly outlined in white papers is that the future of our lives is online.
What we want to do is make life easier, allow your credentials to be at your fingertips and keep your personal information safer. There's no question that we have to make advances in digital infrastructure. You know, we know that when tech works, Aussies are fast adopters and they love the convenience of online. More and more we do our banking and shopping online. We order our food, we ride share, we pay for parking, we book appointments, we do our tax online. And we'd prefer to organise our government services online.
Did you realise years ago when online banking or paying bills online started that it would lead to in-person services being removed? Bill doesn't mention that people are also forced online due to bank branch closures, shop closures, etc. He doesn't mention that the forced COVID lockdowns pushed people online, which of course conveniently sped up the digital revolution. Living our lives predominantly online under centralised control and surveillance is the ultimate goal.
Research by tech think tank Mandela showed that 90% of Australians surveyed prefer to interact with the government on a digital platform. In aggregate, it means millions of hours' time saved to the end of this decade. As one Australian put pithily, they just want us to make it as easy as Amazon. Of course, we can never promise that every government service transaction is that straightforward. Government services have to deliver for all Australians to enhance trust, with reliability, capability, integrity and, of course, compassion. Understanding someone's eligibility for the disability support pension can't be reduced to something as uncomplicated as ordering from Amazon. But we should always be trying to make convenience and ease as an ambition in any service.
So this is government being discussed as a business model, and we are consumers of the government. We are their customers. What does this radical shift mean for democracy?
Research on the New Zealand government services found that if filling out a form is too hard, people will walk away, often with a feeling that government's deliberately making it hard for them to claim their entitlements. Or in other words, accessing government services should not make citizens feel stupid or stressed.
Digital ID will be sold to the people as convenient.
Senator Katie Gallagher and I announced last week a survey of the development of online and face-to-face government services. Responses will inform a report on the future of government services being overseen by the PM's department. We want to hear a diverse range of opinions and experiences so we can make sure that government services are more inclusive, so we can get it right at every step of our digital future. And to get it right, we need to bring a lot of people to the table. We're going to look at the risks and benefits of every policy, program, platform that we implement from every angle.
In the fourth industrial revolution, we are known as smart citizens who have smart government. What does a smart government look like? According to the Global Agenda Council for the World Economic Forum, government's role is to be collectors of data. They are to capture data, map data and curate data, hence the necessity for a digital ID.
I recently held a roundtable with the Tech Council of Australia. We were joined by reps from the tech sector, industry, academia, civil society. Leanne Ho, the former Chief Executive of Economic Justice Australia, reminded the gathering that while we must design for the customer experience, we must ensure that the underlying policy intent is being delivered upon. To differentiate between what is an optional add-on, a nice to have, and what is a service that allows people to put food on their table for their kids.
What allows you to put food on the table for your kids? To get food on the table, you're going to need to get a digital ID.
But how do we get Australia excited about moving to online government services? How do we make online government services as desirable as an Apple product that people queue around the block to see? We have the tech all ready to go digital. We know there is demand for it, and we have a history in this country of being early adopters. So if we have all of these factors, then you have to assume the problem that stands in our way is political. I've spent my time in politics trying to make change that makes life better, more equitable, more inclusive and simpler for Aussies. In that time, it is clear that the cornerstone of change is that every citizen can see themselves in the future as a result of that change.
A significant amount of Australians can see into the future, Bill, and what this is going to look like, and we don't want it. This is evidenced by the amount of negative community submissions you received for the Digital ID Bill. These submissions were ignored.
I read a recent speech to the Australian Information Industry Association by Shadow Minister for Government Services in the Digital Economy today to say that I agree with him on some of the key points. Using data responsibly to provide personalised services, including the increased use of tools such as single-touch payroll. We agree. 2, consider the rollout of voice print, digital assistants, digital identity and video chat appointments. Agree. We do this and constantly ensure the most up-to-date patches and upgrades to those technologies are employed. 3, trial Microsoft's Copilot AI tool. Tick, but we'll do it in a considered and managed way. 4, follow the impressive work of the former New South Wales coalition government established in the Service New South Wales under the leadership of Minister Victor Dominello. Could not agree more. To quote the old ad, I liked Victor so much I persuaded him to come and work with me on our advisory board, and he's here today with other board members.
Both Labor and Liberal are on board with the digital ID system. Here's Victor Dominello during the COVID vaccine rollout. And here he is managing the digital COVID-19 vaccination certificate. Victor has nestled himself within the digital infrastructure space, co-founding Service Gen after leaving politics. His private company is going to work hand in hand with government to transform the public sector, and it's all for our well-being, of course.
5. Data and Digital Ministers meeting to improve coordination with state and territory governments. We agree. We have continued this to oversee the integrated delivery of government service between tiers of government. So we want to work with the coalition. I also want to make some observations about that last point about working with different governments. A coordinated approach across government builds trust in the community. I'll be blunt, I think the biggest barrier I've encountered in Australia to having the convenience of seamless government services is what I would refer to as a plague of fiefdoms. The siloed thinking across departments and agencies has to stop. Not everyone needs their own app. Not everyone needs their own processes. One door is better than many doors.
For centralised control to work, there needs to be only one door you can enter through and only one door that can be closed.
Now, the notion of relinquishing control in the public sector, I think, is the new clay layer. And yes, I acknowledge there are legislative obstacles in some circumstances, but turf protecting prevents Australians from reaping the benefits of a collaborative culture. Organisations under Services Australia are showing what Tell Us Once can look like through a pilot for the birth of a child here in the ACT with the local government. The trial starts with the details the parent provides at the hospital to register their baby for federal government services. It means quick access to critical health services, including enrolling the baby in Medicare, the Medicare safety net, My Health Record, the Australian Immunisation Register, and confirming the birth of the baby for the purposes of Centrelink family assistance claims. Tell us once, get the information, and life is more seamless.
For digital ID to work in the way it is intended, incrementally all details on people from pre-birth to death will be collected and housed under their digital ID.
We need other departments and agencies to come on board so we can offer the Tell Us Once experience across key events in people's life journeys. The benefits are life-changing. Think of a woman fleeing domestic violence. With Tell Us Once, all she would need would be their phone to be curated and to get the curated and ready-to-use assistance. Through her phone, she could prove who she is, connect her with a dedicated social worker, commence a crisis payment, find crisis accommodation, and if she chooses to apply for an AVO, be connected with the law enforcement to commence the process.
In reading many government and private corporation papers, they often use the strategy of raising a disturbing social issue as an example. This has the impact of silencing any debate. Hey, it can save people from domestic violence, sex trafficking, suicide, etc. Don't you care about a child being sex trafficked? If you do, every person in the world, well, probably not every person, the ones at the top, will have ways around it, will need to get a digital ID to stop children being sex trafficked. It makes no sense because it's nonsensical.
I do briefly want to touch on the topic of AI. This is an area where people-focused implementation is a non-negotiable. We have to embrace AI. But we need to look beyond the current hype on generative AI to more fundamental and structured AI, which can be used to look for efficiencies in the back-of-house processes, searching for information so staff can use their time on higher value tasks. As one poster on social media said, I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so I can do art and reading, not for my art to do my art and reading so I can do my laundry and dishes. The proper use of AI depends on its intent. Its safe application relies on clear ethical guidelines. It's about how we harness AI to give humans back the things that they haven't been able to replicate. Time. It's about keeping the human decision-making at the heart of human services.
The algorithms will determine what we can access and when. Bill glosses over this quickly by moving to another lame commentary, which diminishes the seriousness of how human life is changing to one of living under an AI brain, which fundamentally means our lives are stripped down to data points and algorithms control what we can do and say. Human decision-making will not be at the heart of human services, AI will be. The only humans involved are those who write the algorithms. The rest of the humans will be carrying out the results of the algorithms, and there is no human compassion or recourse with algorithms.
In conclusion, we know, you know, that people might chat to their local Member of Parliament at a community event or the school fete once or twice a year. They might catch a bit of news, in the media if they've got nothing else in the evening routine. They might watch a short clip on the train on their way to work. For a lot of Australians, their contact with politics is fleeting.
Bill dumbs down the Australian people here, stating we aren't interested in politics. This is increasingly inaccurate. People are increasingly keeping an eye on politicians and the transformative changes they're bulldozing through. Increasingly, people are aware that government officials, those who are paid to represent the people, are stonewalling them.
But their contact with government through human services, that's a fundamental part of daily life. Government services are the system. So investing in services that are better, more reliable, easier to use is not just about convenience and competence. It's fundamentally about our confidence in our democracy and its capacity to deliver for the people, to meet the obligations of a decent society. I feel that one of our biggest problems sometimes in politics is that we lack ambition and imagination for our policy making and our government services. But we should imagine, because in imagining we set goals to aspire to, not the next foot in front of the previous foot, but the horizon. Imagine if we agreed the sole focus of government departments was to make life easier for the community they serve. If we were less worried about whether the department we work for is getting maximum credit or about our personal career gains and more concerned about being innovative and responsive. But imagine if government service delivery was beyond politics, and that even if political parties changed, the standards that we maintain remain in perpetuity. Imagine a new social pillar of which we can be all proud. A successful digital future will only be forged in partnership with the community. I'm reminded of a perhaps not so famous French Prime Minister who wrote at the time of the 1848 revolution in France. His name was Alexandre Auguste Ledru-Rollin. He said, I'll give you the English version, "There go the people. I must follow them, for I am their leader." Imagine if we practiced radical trust in the people, the consumers of government services, and we listened to them about what they need and how they want to access it. In return, we may be rewarded with the radical trust from the community necessary to fulfil our ambitions of an easy, useful, simple, safe, seamless digital future.
Bill is not following the people. Bill is following a global agenda overseen by the United Nations under Sustainable Development Goal 16.9, which has morphed into everyone in the world needing to have a digital identity by 2030.
My question for you about your approach here is, are you looking at a legislative or changing a law basically to help set up the system that you've got in mind? Will there be privacy protections? Because that's a source of great concern in the community generally now about where data is stored. And why not make it compulsory?
Mark Dreyfus, the Attorney-General, has been leading the work in terms of our privacy legal framework. So we've had an inquiry. I know that AG's department and the Attorney-General are considering their options, so I won't preempt what he does there.
I want to note that in a room full of journalists, this was the only question asked regarding the digital ID bombshells Bill dropped in his speech. Every other question besides this one was focused on the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which Bill did not address in his speech. This is the state of Australian journalism. The Privacy Act Bill refers to is in process of being overhauled. What this means that under the guise of strengthening privacy, our privacy rights will be gutted. I will move now to the global arena and focus on one group in particular, ID 2020, funded primarily by Garvey, Microsoft and Rockefeller, with many other corporate interests engaged, partnering with the United Nations, has been in the background working on the global digital ID system for many years. They have formed a partnership with the Digital Impact Alliance. Of course, ID 2020 are working on programs to provide digital ID with vaccine certificates. At the ID 2020-2017 summit, it is made very clear digital ID will enable access to basic rights and services and unlock social and economic opportunity. And here you can see some of the corporations involved. The following footage is from the 2016 launch of ID 2020. This launch was sponsored by the United Nations Office for Partnerships. Have a listen.
Good day to everyone. My name is Niall McCann. I'm the lead electoral advisor for UNDP, based in our Bureau for Policy and Progress Support here in New York. UN Development Programme, for those of you that may not be familiar, is the UN Specialist Development Agency, and it chairs the UN Development Group on behalf of the UN system. We received an invite to participate in ID 2020 a number of weeks ago, and we're delighted to do so. So I will moderate this press conference. Today, the speakers on the panel are in no particular order. John Edge, the founder of ID 2020, Ruchira Gupta, the founder of Apne App Women Worldwide, Marley Gray, the Director of Business Development, Cloud and Enterprise Blockchain at Microsoft, and Patrick Spence, Director in PricewaterhouseCoopers and a specialist in blockchain. Before I hand over to the speakers, just to say, this is taking place event in the UN for a reason. The UN is delighted to have this conversation. Sustainable Development Goal 16.9 clearly aims to ensure legal identity for all, including birth registration, by 2030. So with that few words, I will hand over. I'm going to ask John to speak first as the founder of ID 2020. John.
Hello. What's very important here is to establish that this is the start of a 15-year ambition. ID 2020 is a hub for gathering the world's innovative technologies to connect them to the United Nations and other organizations who would benefit potentially from discovering this technology. So first things first, Identity 2020 is an enabler. It's an enabler of a conversation. ID 2030 is something that kicks in if ID 2020 works. ID 2020's ambition is to spend 5 years establishing if this emerging technology can be applicable in targeting success in Goal 16.9. I also am very, very happy that the private sector's turned up in such numbers. To have over 100 private sector companies in the room, as Ruchira noted, is rare / may not have happened before.
Work with the industry? Is it going to be conferences or more one-on-one discussions?
So the key here is on the language. We've co-convened a summit at the UN. Niall, correct me if I get this wrong, but ITU and the UN Office for Partnerships. So if you want to work with the UN and you're not a UN agency, you have to co-convene. So ID 2020 is an organization that has the vision to create a hub. It's not an event company. What we've done is co-convened this community. Government, NGO, industry, emerging technology. They're the three participants roughly today. Because within those three is likely the go, no, go on, is this technology applicable? So ID 2020 has the ambition of being the world's largest single-focused innovation hub. And the single focus is legal identity for all. And two of our early partners have been PwC and Microsoft. And I think we'll go PwC first and then over to Microsoft around what it means to partner with a specific industry hub. Go on, Patrick.
Well, I think, first of all, we're proud to be sponsor or be lead sponsor of ID 2020. I think what ID 2020 represents is really simple and smart. It represents bringing, as you say, innovators, policymakers, humanitarian agencies, technologists, and NGOs together. And we're not today looking for solutions. Today, we're looking to build public and private partnerships. We have a focus on the Sustainable Development Goals for the UN in total, not just 16.9. And it aligns with our core values, which is building trust in society. And so that's why we're here today, and we want to help.
What do you hope to be like the three biggest takeaways for the attendees from today's event?
Number one, the private sector is going to pitch up. For the private sector, they're prepared to work together. And for the innovators, there is no barrier to participation.
To that, if you don't mind, yes, to mention what do we hope to get from it in the UN and in UNDP in particular, I would like to see three things. One would be a dialogue, not only within the UN family, but within industry that allows us to work on a set of policy principles on identity management that is shared universally, that will allow us to advise member states, and that member states will know when they request assistance in identity management, will have the basic understanding of what that entails. That is one area. Secondly, I think it is very much an opportunity, as John has said, for the UN system to speak to technology and to the technology sector as to what is technologically possible going forward from a sustainability point of view. What should we avoid? What are going to be new technologies that are going to allow us help member states to enhance and make more holistic their identity management systems. But ultimately, eventually, yes, I like the idea that there would be some form of more formal partnership with the private sector that could involve eventually private sector financing of identity management systems for member states through the medium of bodies like the UN, so that we can all work together on the implementation of SDG 16.9.
Here we have heard Neil McCann, lead electoral advisor for the United Nations Development Programme, stating the United Nations wants to see dialogue within the United Nations family and industry that allows them to work together on a set of policy principles and identity management that is shared universally and will advise member states. Australia is a member state of the United Nations. Number two, opportunity for the United Nations to speak to the technology sector and identify new technologies to help the member states to enhance their identity systems. And number three, private sector financing of identity management systems for nation states through the medium of the United Nations, so they can all work together on the implementation of Sustainable Development Goal 16.9. So this raises two fundamental questions. Why is Bill Shorten being intentionally non-transparent that private interests in collaboration with the United Nations are masterminding the digital ID? And Bill, on behalf of the Australian government, is only implementing the technologies? And secondly, how trustworthy is the United Nations? After all, if a centralised digital ID is being implemented, which will track our every move, purchase, decision, etc., and will allow or block our access to goods and services, do you want to know who is at the top? Who's actually creating and implementing the system?
For the gentleman at Microsoft, I didn't catch your name.
It's Marley Gray.
Marley Gray?
Marley.
Your CEO, Satya Nadella, has identified, identity is sort of one of the key issues or technologies that it wants to lead in. And obviously you're sponsoring this. What are your efforts? Why'd you get involved in this, of course, but how do you see advancing your core technologies, Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, and all that, to support whether it's used? Do you see blockchain as that technology, or what do you see?
Well, there's a couple of fundamental things that we see. First of which is we do talk about partnerships and collaboration. Everything that we do will have to be in a partnership with all parties. So it's going to have to be a community, worldwide driven effort. We do also have a technological perfect storm that brings a lot of this sort of catalyst thinking to think innovatively. First is the cloud. We think is going to be one of the fabrics that is a part of this transformation. Very inexpensive mobile devices. So having accessibility for individuals is going to be very important. And then this notion of establishing identity. and secure identity for not just individuals, but everything, and being able to track and be able to transact securely. So secure identity is one of those key enablers to allow you to flow through these different technology innovations. The challenge is not necessarily the technology or the organization, is bringing it all together. And that's only going to be done through these partnerships. So Microsoft, we do have a lot of identity solutions in the enterprise. We also have a huge consumer footprint with our digital footprint across the consumer and enterprise space. We do think that blockchain technology is a part of the solution. Will it be the solution? We don't know. We think there's some good ideas there that we can use to evolve this partnership. But that's the main reason we're here, is to try to help raise the tide, to lift all boats, including those in the underdeveloped markets, the unbanked, and the underserved.
Matthew Lee, Intercity Press, on behalf of the Free UN Coalition for Access. Thanks a lot for this briefing. You got a lot of people here. On topic, I wanted to know how this relates to or may work with. There's a World Bank project that covered before called Identification for Development, which is specifically on on developing countries and stuff like that. So do you think there's anything you can take from them? Are you going to work with that? And then also, I'd come in part because I thought that this was sponsored by the Office of Partnerships. And I have a question. There's been, you all may or may not know, given that you're in the UN building, there's a kind of there's a UN scandal. There were 6 indictments, including the indictment of the former PGA, John Ash, and of a number of people. This happened in October. There's been a UN audit which said basically that the UN Office of Partnerships doesn't do any due diligence, do no due diligence before partnering with outside business interests. So I wanted to know, if you can, what are they here in the room that they can answer that? UNDP and its South you may have heard of them. They're part of this thing. I guess I'm highlighting to you that there's controversy has arisen in terms of the ease with which the UN partners with business. So is that your perception? And where's the Office of Partnership? Thanks.
On the second question, that I have no knowledge, understanding, and is nothing to do with the topic of rescuing girls who've been trafficked. So by all means, find somebody to talk to, but it's not anybody.
The sponsor of the press conference is the Office of Partnerships. Yeah. So I'm wondering, are they here? It says press conference by them. It's sponsored by. It's not what it says in the media alert. Okay.
Note the immediate switching from the issue put on the table by journalist Matthew Lees regarding the Office for Partnerships credibility and who they do business with to, we are talking about sex trafficking. Again, this is purposeful to shut down any concerns and nuance raised. In 2016, the controversy was in relation to serious allegations of bribery related to high United Nations officials. Charges were raised against John Ashey, General Assembly President between 2013 to 2014, who also held numerous other United Nations roles, and 5 other people. A number of United Nations officials were charged regarding a $1.3 million bribery scheme involving their positions at the United Nations. US Attorney Bahara said, if proven, and it was proven, today's charges will confirm that the cancer of corruption that plagues too many local and state governments infects the United Nations as well. As alleged, for Rolex's bespoke suits and a private basketball court, John Ash, the 68th President of the UN General Assembly, sold himself and the global institution he led. United in greed, the defendants allegedly formed a corrupt alliance of business and government, converting the UN into a platform for profit. You can find out information about John William Ash on Wikipedia. He played a central role in the negotiations for the Sustainable Development Goals. He launched the Global Sustainable Development Foundation to support the Millennium Development Goals. Before Ash could testify, he was found dead at his home. He died of injuries suffered when a barbell he was lifting from a bench dropped on his neck. In another press conference, Matt Lees goes on to ask more questions about the bribery case.
Yes, Mr. Lee.
Now that the UN bribery case, as it's described in Lower Manhattan, there's a filing dated June 25th. I know that that says, this is the quote, "The UN declined to identify to the government all individuals who were interviewed in connection with the preparation of the report, called the UN Task Force Report." And this is being used by Aung Lapsang to say he didn't bribe anyone because everyone bribes everyone at the UN, basically.
Extensively to facilitate the proper course of justice in this case. The proceedings are ongoing, and I'm not going to make any comments while these proceedings are ongoing.
Right. What's your name, sir?
You don't have to
Officer?
You don't have to tell your name. Please leave. You have my name.
2 B's, INS?
Spell it how you want.
So on Friday, there was the Eid event at which Antonio Guterres gave a speech. And I want to put this in a general way because I don't understand it. During the event, as the event went on, I was required to leave by Lieutenant Dobbins and the emergency response unit. And it seemed strange because there were many other non-resident correspondents at the event. So I wanted to know, one, what are the rules? Number two, is it acceptable for UN security to single out and target a specific journalist? And I asked this because I've previously written a story about promotions in DSS, including Mr. Dobbins, and whatever that is, what are the provisions in the UN to make sure that security cannot abuse its powers? So those were I'd like you to answer that. And also, they didn't give their names. The other individuals refused to give their names. Is that UN policy?
UN security has their policies. Your concerns with them need to be addressed to UN security. I'm not going to comment on your own problems with UN security.
I don't understand. It's happened at
Brendan,
a speech.
This
happened at a speech by the Secretary General. I'm sorry.
Your security issues are things
It's not a security issue. It's done in the name of the Secretary General.
Here's Catherine Pollard. Catherine Pollard, I'm a journalist at the UN doing my work. These are your people. They say they're under orders to do it. Is it from you?
Can you update us on the status of the usual occupant of this chair?
The usual occupant of this chair. There was an incident, I think, last week, or a bit. I'm starting to get lost in the weeks. His status is being reviewed, and I know my understanding is that he will be having discussions with various parts of this administration, and then we'll keep you updated, and I'm sure he will keep you updated.
And is he currently suspended? Is he
yes,
barred from entry to this?
His credentials and pass have been pending review.
Not using any force. Where's Tomamonte? Where's Christian Saunders? I'm covering the budget. I'm a journalist.
Independent journalist Matt Lee forcibly removed from the United Nations, stripped of press credentials. Lee believes that the UN leadership is retaliating against him because he has reported on their apparent conflicts of interest and corruption. Lee had been a long-term journalist situated at the United Nations. Lee recalls in 2005 he first showed up at the UN for a conference with Bank of America and Citibank. They were bragging about funding green energy, Lee says. Of course, they're also deep in mountaintop coal removal. Soon Lee discovered a wealth of disturbing stories, including that UN peacekeepers had been raping people they had been sent to help. He has since followed many more threads. In Cameroon, the UN is in bed with the government there. They don't report on human rights violations. Yemen, the Saudis buy UK weapons to bomb Yemen, but the UN envoy to Yemen is British. And Sri Lanka. The UN pulled its officers out of the north there before a 2008 ethnic cleansing of the Tamil people, and then underreported the genocide. I'm including this information in this video because we are already in a one world governance system. I say this because if you track all our current government reports back, they lead to United Nations reports and conference agreements. In the case of global centralized control, you better have a sound, non-corruptible organisation which is not working for corporate vested interests, right? Particularly when the vast majority of the world's population is going to be placed under a digital ID to be able to access any rights. Back to the 2016 ID 2020 press release.
Okay, so go back to the first question. So the first question, restate it again, sorry.
I guess it has to do, if you're limiting it to that, it has to do with whether this project is going to work with World
so
Bank.
ID40. So
yes.
We're part of the ID40 working group. ID40 is a fantastic initiative.
So ID 2020 is working with the World Bank ID4D. Though this is not a World Bank initiative, it shows what digital ID aid landscape looks like. So in 2018, the world's first baby was born on the blockchain in Tanzania. The project gives each pregnant woman a digital ID that entitles them to pregnancy vitamins such as folic acid and tracks the woman's progress via data added to the blockchain. So this is what's going to occur for all of us under digital ID. The system is now the driving force behind their mothers gaining access to postnatal care, medication, and follow-up appointments. So here we see how it becomes the stick. Unless you have the digital ID, you are not able to access services. Refugees are also being put under digital IDs. The official story is that it stops corruption within the aid networks. The other side of the story is that the digital ID and the tracking and tracing of babies through to adults allows for impact markets, social impact bonds to be constructed on vulnerable people. Venture capitalists and philanthrocapitalists bet on the outcomes of people and make profit returns. Okay, I'm finishing up now with a video I did about a year ago on the scope of digital ID. My understanding has moved on quite a bit since at the point where I made this video. Smart cities are just the start. Cognitive resilient cities are where we are heading. But this video will still be useful if you don't know much about the arena of the digital ID.
My name is Kate Mason, and I will be unpacking the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 16. Promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. 16.9 by 2030 provide legal identity for all, including birth registrations. And this means digital ID. In the UN report Roadmap for Digital Cooperation, they explain that they want everyone with a digital ID to be able to access goods and services and connected to the internet by 2030, and the United Nations will be the platform to oversee the process. The World Economic Forum, the 1,000 largest corporate entities with individually $5 billion in turnover, is invested in digital ID, and they explain that it's pivotal to access finance and work, and they're calling for a decentralized ID, and this is blockchain. To quote Alison McDowell, blockchain is a digital ledger that keeps track of everything. Picture a real-time account book that keeps track not only of your monetary assets, but also civil records like birth certificates, marriage certificates, and court proceedings, voting records, property ownership, certifications and educational credentials, health education including DNA, and data from wearable technologies, public benefit access like food stamps, and even one's movements and social interactions via QR code, health passports, and contact tracing. So what is digital ID? It's a single citizen digital identity system built around a unique identifier, such as the reference numbers lying at the core of many national ID systems. The plan is for every person in the world to be online with a digital ID by 2030, and the reason for this is because access to goods, services, work, and recreation will be increasingly only accessed through the internet. This is outlined by the World Economic Forum in how a digital ID is essential for access. Your digital ID includes biometrics. Some forms of biometrics include finger and palm prints, facial recognition, iris scans, blood, and even brain and heart signals. Enter the metaverse. The metaverse is the emerging 3D-enabled digital space that uses virtual and augmented reality to allow people to have lifelike personal and business experiences online. The metaverse will include commerce, healthcare, education, industry, fashion, entertainment, and more, and will require a digital ID to access. Where everything will have a digital twin. In a world where everything is increasingly inclining to become digital and virtual, the metaverse holds the power to transform our digital lives. A digital twin is a virtual model of a process, product, or service, and it includes us. Imagine that you as a person are represented digitally. Your digital activities, behavior, decisions, and future decisions are not only known, but silently influenced by your digital shadow. Every time you access a digital device, even when you move or just sit with your smartphone, there's data generated, and this data is used to build your digital profile. When predictive analytics are applied, vendors and other observers can project your next education, career, avocation, and even personal inclinations and moves. So let's see how this will affect us in a few essential domains. In work, AI is replacing jobs. Artificial intelligence could replace the equivalent of 300 million full-time jobs, a report by investment bank Goldman Sachs says. The jobs which are being eradicated are many white-collar and service jobs. They are being replaced with online jobs focused on tech, robotics, and training AI. Policy Horizons is the policy arm of the Canadian government, and they spell out that much cognitive and physical labour is unbundled and networked. Old-fashioned jobs are unbundled into tasks, many of which can be automated. Others are available as an on-demand service on tasking platforms. Knowledgeable workers or machines operate remotely anywhere in the physical world that is connected to networks. This is done by teleoperation of a machine or remote guidance of a person connected through a mixed reality device. Where we live. Approximately 70% of the world's population will reside in smart cities by 2050. The growth of smart cities means citizens will be able to quickly connect with a host of services, including health, public transportation, and public works. For citizens to engage with these services, seamless and secure digital identity tools will be essential. Health. The future of health in smart cities. Smart cities could offer citizens access to certain healthcare services from unattended kiosks that could manage tasks like analysing saliva, drawing blood, or filling prescriptions. Blockchain could greatly improve the management of medical records and delivery of medical and mental health services if physicians gain easier access to complete information when providing care. This becomes alarming when we look at the genome technologies being discussed. CRISPR gene editing helps us understand DNA's role in human diseases. It allows to turn gene expression off, effectively stopping a person from getting a disease to which they're genetically predisposed. CRISPR may increasingly give people the ability to code their own DNA and that of their children. Some parents may wish to give their children resistance to diseases, enhanced intelligence, and other abilities. Imagine a world where the state enforces certain procedures as algorithms have ascertained you will be a potential societal burden. Finances. Here we can see how countries all around the world are in lockstep regarding central bank digital currency. CBDC is a form of central bank electronic money that could be used by households and businesses to make payments. And digital ID will be essential to access your finances. Food. IBM discusses blockchain for the food system. With a digital food system, network participants have access to tools and data to improve food safety. I want to point out now that increasingly control methods will be implemented under the justification of keeping us safe and principles of equity. We must be alert when we hear these phrases. They are smokescreens. Scientists from Harvard, MIT, and Boston University have developed a way to track produce from paddock to plate right down to the last metre. The researchers engineered microbes filled with information which could be sprayed on surfaces and act as a DNA barcode when later scanned. And here we have Rockefeller Reset the Table report. Broadband access is essential to shifts to online enrolment, online purchasing of food, direct farm-to-consumer purchasing, telemedicine, teleconsultations, as well as education, finance, and employment. Education and the metaverse. Welcome to the year 2026 where learning is earning. Your ledger account tracks everything you've ever learnt in units called EduBlocks. Your profile displays all the EduBlocks you've earnt. Employers can use this information to offer you a job or a gig that matches your skills. You can also use the ledger to find investors in your education. Since the ledger is already tracking income earned from each EduBlock, you can offer investors a percentage of your future income in exchange for free learning hours. The ledger is built on blockchain. This means that every EduBlock that has ever been earned is a permanent part of the growing public record of our collective learning and working. Social credit. China's social credit system is a set of databases and initiatives that monitor and assess the trustworthiness of individuals. A good rating could offer priority healthcare or deposit-free renting of public housing, while a negative rating could see individuals banned from flights and trains. Those who lose credibility will find it hard to make a tiny step in society, said by the ex-premier of the People's Republic of China. Here we have the policy arm of the Canadian government. Social credit may become a more powerful determinant of socio-economic inclusion. Rating a user's credibility trusts social credit, as is currently done by Uber, eBay and many others, is becoming more common. At the same time, new technologies such as blockchain bring new ways of capturing and assessing more information. Together, these developments could lead to new ways of evaluating who should qualify for credit and services based on algorithms. Now we get to the crux of the matter, smart contracts. This is where all I've discussed, health, movement, social credit, work, finances, mental health, education, food, etc., which is all captured under your digital ID, can be brought together to affect how you participate in society. Smart contracts work by following simple if, when, then statements that are written into code on a blockchain. A network of computers executes the actions when predetermined conditions have been met and verified. The digital ID starts incrementally. In Australia, it is being rolled out for access to government services and they emphasise it's voluntary. However, considering the fact that the future of almost everything is online, we can see that our government is not being transparent around where we are heading. Take India as an example. India's national biometric ID system Aadhaar, which was launched in 2009. It is currently the largest digital ID program in the world with over 99% of Indian adults enrolled. Individuals must submit a photo and biometric data to receive a unique 12-digit ID number. Originally launched as a means to mitigate fraud and waste, authorities initially said the program would be voluntary, but Aadhaar authentication has gradually become mandatory for access to welfare and other government services like food rations. Massive corporate interests dictate the digital ID systems, and our government is essentially the middleman putting them into policies. Digital IDs rely on private-public partnerships and collaborations, but these close partnerships often result in the implementation of corporate solutions that do not necessarily serve community needs. Private corporate interests often play a hidden yet critical role in all aspects of these digital identity projects, from their design through their application and use. I'm going to finish with an example of how digital ID ushers in a dehumanising system where we are the product, where corporate entities feast off the most vulnerable populations whilst having the gall to virtue signal. This project gives each pregnant woman a digital ID that entitles them to pregnancy vitamins such as folic acid and tracks the woman's progress via data added to the blockchain, from registration to a medical appointment to birth. And speaking of birth, the first baby to be born on the blockchain was delivered on the 13th of July 2018. The system is now the driving force behind their mothers gaining access to postnatal care, medication, and follow-up appointments as required. These babies are trapped before birth into a predatory financing system where their every move is recorded and they are primarily a digital commodity to be bet upon. Amply involved a digital identity and subsidy management system for preschools in South Africa. The schools take attendance through an application on a tablet to generate impact tokens, which the school redeemed for subsidies from the South African government. In order to take digital attendance, every student was assigned unique digital identifiers. This project impacted over 60,000 students whose digital identity will follow them throughout the public education system, and depending on how the government moves forward, could extend to healthcare and other government services. At its core, IXO serves an investment platform designed for high volumes of sharing and betting on data. The sharing and betting revolve around financing social outcomes, which pay out interest to the investors if the projects meet predetermined goals verified by digitally collected evidence. And to finish with the 1,000 largest corporates in the world who are giving us a tip that if we don't conform, it won't be so easy to bring the digital ID in. Without public education, clear utility and incentives, decentralised approaches to ID may be unable to garner the broad stakeholder buy-in and user demand required for mass adoption.
All that's been exchanged is a digital thumbs up from the government that you are who you say you are.
Look at the madman, lunatic. Seems like he don't have no plan.